Week 1 is in the books, and these are the 25 best teams in college football. Starting with honorable mentions, Air Force is a team who looked sharp this past Saturday. However, I'll still keep them out of my top 25 as they did play Robert Morris, who isn't particularly great at football. Still, Air Force would rack in 42 unanswered points through the fourth quarter, winning 42-7. As we've grown to expect from the Falcons, we saw a great running performance where they had 374 rushing yards. I waited so long for that comeback against Georgia Tech, and in the fourth quarter, it finally happened. This whole team clutched up. They were getting after the quarterback and had the Yellow Jackets on lockdown. Offense scored multiple times late too after a mediocre start. I think they just needed a warm up. This team will be in the top 25 real soon though. Quarterback Jalen Daniels didn't play, but they still beat Missouri State 48-17. They should be able to make another bowl game this year. That's really great for Kansas football. They struggled so much offensively. It was tough to watch. In the fourth quarter alone, they failed to convert 3 fourth and longs. They finished with -2 rushing yards and were simply unspectacular. With the amount of missed catches, South Carolina has no reliable game plan, and Spencer Rattler threw for 353 yards without any touchdowns, getting sacked 8 times. This protection was awful, and against SEC defenses, I don't know how they'll fare. Defense is average, nothing crazy, they're borderline top 30. Leonard completed just over 50% of his passes, as Duke would beat Clemson 28-7. He would also catch Clemson's defense lacking several times, rushing for nearly 100 yards. Still, I wasn't impressed by this team. They played really great, I can't deny that. They could be a 10-win team. Looks like it right now, I'll probably rank them next week. Johnny Hodges is a linebacker I like, and it's so bad I wish our entire defense really picked up in the second half. They fell short in a game that was back and forth, really entertaining. And one thing I said in last week's ranking video was that I don't like Chandler Morris, and this game proves exactly why. He kept underthrowing, throwing it behind the receiver, and just simply playing awful. This is a game where they ran the ball real well until Colorado's defense stepped out of nowhere in the fourth quarter, forcing a turnover on downs. I can truthfully say Chandler Morris got outplayed by Shedeur Sanders, but the TCU defense did tackle well most of the game. Defensive backs looked terrible, giving up so many big plays. These issues are fixable, I believe. They have 2 weeks until the next primetime game against Houston, which might actually be a good game. The Luke Fickell era has begun, and the Badgers picked up a win against Buffalo. Heading into this season, I didn't expect much from their passing game despite bringing in gunslinger Tanner Mordecai. If I did, I would have been disappointed in his 2 picks thrown with only 189 yards and 1 touchdown. Good thing that's not their focus offensively. Trez showed why he's one of the best running backs in college, rushing for 157 yards this game. In total, Wisconsin offense had 314 rushing yards. 5 times they punted this game. They outplayed Buffalo, keeping them to only 17 points. I still believe they're worse than Iowa, but I still have faith in Fickell to turn this team for the better. Iowa quickly jumped out to a 14-point lead, which had me believing they may actually be able to cover the 20-point spread. However, they will slow down a bit as they're known to do, and K. McNamara wouldn't pass for another touchdown this game. Still, he played real well, passing for 191 yards. Led by Deontay Craig, this defense looked nice, but they won't be able to stop offensive powerhouses of the Big Ten like Michigan or Ohio State, who we'll get to in a minute. Overall, this team is more exciting than last year's, but I'm doubtful they can be that competitive, which is why I had them outside my top 25 after a ranking of 23 last week. Replacing Iowa in my top 25 will be Kentucky. Yes, Iowa shut out Kentucky 21-0 on last year's Music City Bowl, but if these two teams were to play in a rematch, you wouldn't be able to convince me Iowa would win. Kentucky scored 44 points against Ball State, who I would say is actually comparable to Iowa's opponent, Utah State. Devin Leary had a decent game, but the star was Raymond Davis, who ran for 114 yards on 12 carries. KJ Jefferson is back, and once again, one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Arkansas was up 35-3 at halftime, and it's clear they're in the first quartile of college football teams as they dominated Western Carolina, finishing with a final score of 56-13. They didn't even need to run for more than 105 yards too, which is unusual as they averaged well over 200 rushing yards a game just a season ago. They'll have a tough stretch after they play Kent State, where BYU will be the weakest opponent in 5 weeks. Tulane beat South Alabama 37-17, easily covering the 6-point spread. Jackson and Keys had 106 and 96 receiving yards respectively, as Michael Pratt finished 14 for 15 with 294 yards and 4 touchdowns. Insane. Defense was stellar as well, as they picked up 3 fumbles and got 2 interceptions. They may have only won by 20, but this was total domination in my eyes. I think they stand a good chance against Ole Miss next week. Speaking of which, Ole Miss had an astounding win Saturday, beating Mercer 73-7. Jackson Dart started this game, passing for 334 yards and 4 passing touchdowns, completing 73% of his passes before former Oklahoma State star quarterback Spencer Sanders would come in to throw for 2 touchdowns. Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins would each get over 100 yards respectively as Zachariah Franklin wouldn't see the field. Their defense, led by Montgomery, didn't let a single score occur during the last 3 quarters, setting an example of what SEC defense looks like. They played awful. This looked like a spring game. So many mistakes defensively. For as much talent as there is on this team, probably 4 day 1 draft picks defensively alone, this defense looked garbage. I still have them in my top 25 though, because I know Dabo Swinney can do a better job and be a better coach than he was last night. This performance was pathetic, and I haven't even gone to hate Klubnik yet. In my ranking video last week, I said Klubnik was a downgrade from Uiagalelei, and I was honestly surprised this game. He didn't look bad necessarily, passing for 209 yards and splitting a touchdown with an interception. He was dotting a lot in fact. Clemson also ran the ball pretty well, always finding holes as a team, and Shipley had 114 yards on 17 carries. I just don't know how it was so hard for them to get in the end zone. They lost 2 fumbles in this game in scoring position and had a field goal blocked in the first half. So many things went wrong, but I have hope they will turn it around. Oregon State handled San Jose State with ease. DJ Uiagalelei looked like he made the right choice transferring from Clemson to Oregon State, as he's on a better team now, and he passed for 239 yards with 3 touchdowns. Damian Martinez ran for 135 yards and 8.1 yards a carry. This is good for Oregon State, as they need a wide arsenal to compete with Oregon, Washington, and Utah in the Pac-12 North. They held the Spartans to 17 points, which is really nice as they scored 28 against USC last week in what was a higher-paced game. The Beavers don't look legitimate yet, but they remain in my rankings. This team is legit. I'm not just saying that just to say. Colorado is real, and they're a top 25 team, no questions about it. All game, their defense backs look good. They were making plays, but the tackling from their linebackers and backs was pretty bad. Missed a lot of tackles throughout the game, and their line looks small for some reason. Depth is definitely a concern there. But onto the offense, man, do they have some good receivers who can get separation, and I would give Shedeur Sanders his props as one of the best decision makers in all of college football. Boy, was I wrong about this team. Heading into this season, I questioned Dylan Gabriel and his capability of leading a powerhouse offense, and I was wrong. Him and backup Jackson Arnold combined for 422 passing yards against Arkansas State en route to their 73-0 victory. In this game, the Sooners also had 220 rushing yards, which is absolutely insane. One thing I did get right about this team was their improved defense, as they made no mistakes, letting up 0 points like I mentioned earlier. I'm not even overhyping Oklahoma. They are serious, even if they did play one of the worst Group of 5 teams. This game was heavenly for Kansas State. Will Howard did it all, passing for 2 touchdowns, rushing for 1, and even scoring as a receiver. Florida State transfer Treshaun Ward was one to throw that pass. He had himself a game too, rushing for 2 touchdowns on top of that. They shut out Southeast Missouri State 45-0. That speaks for itself. They only allowed 6 rushing yards, which is absolutely crazy. Can't wait to see them in action against Troy next week. North Carolina looked pretty decent this game. It's their first one since November 12th last year, and it was very much needed. They would run it in for the first touchdown against South Carolina, who had 12 players on the field at that time. They allowed a similar drive against them, but would jump up to a 17-14 point lead at halftime. In this game, Drake May didn't look like a Heisman candidate at all. I will remind you every single video that I don't like Drake May. He completed 75% of his passes though for 269 yards and threw for 2 touchdowns, while also throwing 2 interceptions back-to-back in South Carolina territory. Fortunately, their defense held South Carolina scoreless after that and didn't even let up a single passing touchdown all game, despite giving up 353 yards. British Brooks played well, and this run game was good with that O-line. Gray and Rooker 8, North Carolina succeeded. No Ken Rising, no problem. 80% of fans are just using this game to trash Florida, but if you look at Utah, you will know why they won. They came in with a clear game plan, and it was evident since the first offensive play, which resulted in a touchdown. They would also run for over 100 yards as a team, allowing only 13 rushing yards on 21 attempts. It doesn't matter too much that they allowed 333 passing yards, since only 19 of those yards directly resulted in a touchdown. They didn't even have to score the last 25 minutes. A good defense is how they beat USC last year, and they seem to be heading on their way to another Pac-12 championship. It'll be interesting to see them travel to Waco to take on the Bears next week. Following a season full of ups and downs, Texas A&M starts the season with a really big up, as they beat New Mexico 52-10. Connor Wagman looked good this game, passing for 5 touchdowns and 236 yards, which you'd love to see. Evan Stewart himself had 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. They scored 28 points in the second quarter alone, and it's nice to see Texas A&M take more risks and not be so predictable. Hopefully this stays true, as they do face many tough opponents this year, as usual. They got Miami next week, and that's tough in itself. First half, LSU was a step ahead. Jaden Daniels was doing his thing, rushing for 10-20 yards a time, while the defense was forcing bad passes and even an interception out of Jordan Travis. Yet, Mekhi Wingo and the rest of the LSU defense was just completely neutralized in the second half. Many times this game, the defensive backs looked terrible after being locked down in the first half. And just as I said in last week's video, LSU is not DBU anymore. Still, Tigers are a great team who would have remained in the game longer had the defense not gone so worn down and receivers not dropped so many passes. Bo Nix seems to have gained respect out of everyone as he led the charge to an 81-7 slaughter of Portland State, completing 23 of 27 passes for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also in this game, running backs Irving and James attributed to the 348 rushing yards as a team. Everyone on this Ducks team looked solid and NFL ready. Oregon travels to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech next week in a game that there's a potential upset watch for. However, Oregon is looking much improved from the team that lost 49-3 to Georgia last year, and they are serious contenders in the Pac-12 North. They beat Virginia 49-3. First half was a little slow for them, but their defense held up real well all game. That defensive line is tough. They were supreme. Milton played real well, I thought, and I know many fans are saying to put Nico in, which they did one drive, but I really think Milton is too good to bench. He likes to throw deep just like Hendon Hooker from last year, and I've seen comments saying he's a running back. Like, what? Anyways, Keaton is a stud, and their rushing trio got 287 yards this game, which is what I'm most excited about for this team. Yes, Virginia is awful this year, but Tennessee is truly a top 10 team. One of the most praised teams this week, Penn State has gotten a lot of attention, especially Drew Aller. Drew absolutely shined in his debut, winning Big Ten Player of the Week after passing for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns. Already, he has inserted himself into the Heisman race. Nick Singleton didn't disappoint either, rushing for 70 yards and got a touchdown on 13 carries. Primetime was a good spotlight for these two Heisman chasers. King, Robinson, and the rest of the defense look vicious. Penn State's spirit is high right now, and I would definitely invest in their stock. They're just so unbelievably good. Just as I predicted in my last video, Washington absolutely smashed Boise State, and their defense actually impressed me more than their offense. Don't let Boise State's 460 yards fool you. Braylon Trice and Hampton looked like future NFL players and were all over the run. McMillan played great, Odunze played great, Penix aimed deep a lot as always, misfiring occasionally. These receivers are great, but Penix is overrated in my opinion. He's not on Caleb Williams' tier, and he's closer to Jordan Travis really, despite having different play styles. They don't really need a run game implemented into the scheme, as their plays work so great getting past safeties and making them go to the wrong side, always leaving someone totally wide. Great plays from the Huskies. This team plays so well. I counted them out at halftime after a terrible performance by their O-line and inability of their receivers to get open. However, Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman stepped up. Jordan Travis took risks, letting plays up to the receivers to handle, and it paid off. I was also impressed by this defensive line and their edge rushers. Jaden Daniels would pressure so many times, and they stopped nearly every LSU run and every fourth down conversion from happening. They ran away with the game in the end, but it is important to note that it did indeed come after numerous first half struggles. I was really surprised by the Seminoles. If you were disappointed by Notre Dame last season, you're in a cheat this year. After destroying Navy, they take it a step further against Tennessee State, winning 56-3. Austin Estime had 116 rushing yards as Hartman only played 5 drives as there was little competition really. Once again, the defense looked aggressive as they played a team who passes unlike last week's opponent, so we got to get a better evaluation of the overall defense. Simply dominant performances by Notre Dame these past 2 weeks. This team is fun to watch. Caleb Williams is capable of making some plays that literally no one else can. I can really see the Patrick Mahomes comparisons. His weapons are great as well. I love Zachariah Branch so much. 14 different receivers caught passes. Defense also looks great. Secondary is young and susceptible to making mistakes just as Ohio State last year. Actually, that's a really great comparison. This year's USC is a ton like Ohio State. Great quarterback, great receivers, just in the defense may be worse. But they'll win games as they don't face any team who matches their offense. Speaking of Ohio State, number 5 is Ohio State. Just as we all expected, Ohio State blew Indiana out. However, there's a serious issue with this team going forward, and that is Kyle McCord. He didn't look great at all, rather cumbersome, passing for 239 yards, an interception, and no touchdowns. Maybe it was because Jerzon Newton was coming after him all game. When they brought in Devin Brown, though, the situation didn't improve, and they reverted back to Kyle McCord. They were hoping one of these quarterbacks would show up, but neither did. Yet, it looks like Kyle McCord is still the starter. Another headline was Indiana's ability to limit Ohio State as they had them predicted. Coach Ryan Day will make adjustments going into future games. The reason Ohio State is high in my rankings is because their defense. Last year, they may have been top 10, but now they boast a top 3 defense as they've improved tremendously with their zone coverages, not allowing any plays to happen really. Texas looked like they struggled against Rice. Quinn Ewers faced pressure many times, which is concerning, even though Rice does have a good defensive line. I just expected more from Texas. They were stopped on 4th down twice. Neither sides looked like they gave 100%, which is understandable as they may be saving some for Alabama next week. The dual back action has returned, and they both looked athletic. Xavier Worthy is tremendous for the Longhorns, even though they only gave up 176 yards. Something looked off about this defense. Had JT Downs not regressed as much as he has, this game could have been a lot closer. Michigan was a team that looked complete this Saturday. They scored 30 straight points, only allowing a single field goal as time expired. JJ McCarthy shined, only throwing one bad pass really, getting 280 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Also in this game, Blake Corum ran for 73 yards, looking like the Heisman candidate I predicted he would be in my Heisman video last week. Everything comes easier with an elite offensive line, and their defense submits them as a top 5 team, and there's no holes in this team whatsoever. Alabama absolutely steamrolled Middle Tennessee State as expected, scoring 2 touchdowns each quarter for a convincing 50-67 victory. Millville played decent, passing for 3 touchdowns. He also used his legs to add 48 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Downs really stood out on the defense, as the entire team really was simply amazing, forcing 2 turnovers. Alabama is back when they really never left. They were pretty much flawless this game. They looked much more disciplined than they did this time last season, and it's really pleasant to watch this team, no matter the opponent. Still my number 1 team, Georgia gives me absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be the Kings. Carson Beck is a likable player off and on the field. Brock Bowers has played good as he always has, and their defense has not changed. Best in the country. Javon Bullard, Kamari Lassiter, Nazir Stackhouse, I can go on and on. Kirby Smart is the best coach maybe, and an undefeated season coming up once again. Ha 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 ha. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment what you would change in these rankings. My full rankings are in the description. There's a flashbang coming up. See you next week.